Ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to be able to share some ideas with you on the topic of resetting capitalism in the run-up to the conference. And of course, I'm also looking forward to the corresponding session on Monday. This event, as well as a relational finance initiative broadly speaking, aims, among other things, to inquire what insights we can harvest from the social market traditions in countries like Benelux, France and Germany for overcoming contemporary problems related to financial matters. Being closely associated with the German variant of the social market economy, which rests on the ordoliberal approach of the so-called Freiburg School, which I suppose might be one of the reasons why I have got invited to contribute, I shall have to say a few words about potential takeaways from this approach for the theme of the conference. Firstly, let me start with some critical remarks, not too critical remarks, but some critical remarks about the concept of the debt jubilee, something we will discuss in the Monday morning session. I don't know how many of you will be present in the morning session when we discuss Arjo Klamer's paper on the matter, but I would find it worthwhile to dwell a bit more on this unusual idea. As it happens, I'm a theologian as well as an economist, so I can only second Arjo's in his normative, historical and theological assessment of the matter. It is indeed true that historically that has always had somewhat bad flavor, and also that throughout history swelling debt levels has usually gotten viewed as unsustainable, leading to episodes of debt cleansing or the so-called jubilee. I also agree that normatively one can find many things to lament in contemporary societies, many of which have a financial dimension to them. Many commentators view the current distribution of wealth as far too unequal, our stance towards the planet and the natural environment as unsustainable, and the most disprivileged in our societies as not receiving the adequate amount of support. I might not agree with every inch of the interpretation of many of these criticisms, but I can, of course, appreciate the direction of their critique, as well as the moral imperative to care more for the poorest individuals in our societies. Having said that, I do think it is also proper to look at the many successes that have been achieved over the past decades, such as increasing standards of living for the most people in developed countries, but of course much more so in many of the developing nations, greater access to education, and a drastic reduction in absolute poverty around the world. I think that as economists, we should not deal exclusively or predominantly with digging up antiquated moral judgment and then present-day policy prescription on that. We much rather should, I would say, offer comparison of institutional arrangements. Institutions matters. Or in other words, we should find out why certain things work out the way they do, and in case they do not work out as desired, offer solution to improve their working. So it's about an improvement of rules, an improvement of institutions. So institutions are some rules to solve problems. So when it comes to institutions that facilitate human flourishing, and that is the main aim of having good institutions, I think that we economists have actually created a vast amount of workable knowledge about what Deirdre McCluskey, a good friend of both Arjo Klamer and me, has called the Great Enrichment. The process of rapid expansion of wealth that started in the 18th century is one of the most remarkable success of human history, and for which having a fitting explanation has potential to vastly influences the lives of billions of people to the better. Now, even though there are differences in nuances, most economists would consider the emergence of the market economy as a crucial ingredient in that success story, without which the favorable developments, and indeed us sitting here and having the luxury to debate questions of that sort, would not have been possible. It turns out that the social market economy, even though it stresses the importance of incorporating social elements into its operation, has spent a great amount of effort to inquire into the prerequisites of a market order. Walter Eucken, the founding father of the Freiburg School of the Order Liberal movement, came up with 7 constituting principles of a market order. While the price system is located at the center, the 6 surrounding principles are, in Eucken's view, equally constitutive for a functional market order. Notice that among those, the principles of private property and the steadiness of economic policy should speak very much against the notion of a debt jubilee and rapid transformation. If there was a central message from the economic history of the past few centuries, it would be the one that reliable and easily enforceable private property rights are an absolute precondition for any sort of economic development. So think, for example, on the transformation processes in the former Soviet Union, or simply look at the Doing Business Index published by the World Bank, or comparable indices like the International Property Rights Index, which brings the overachieving importance of stable property rights to the forefront. Having said that, it is easy to see how calls for a radical debt jubilee or any drastic measure along those lines cannot find my approval, given that the honoring a debt contract freely entered into by both the creditors and the debtors. The debtor must be considered as failing into the realm of property rights. I'm really looking forward to discuss these issues with Ayo and others on Monday. However, a liberal, pluralistic society which aims at the welfare of the people needs a political culture in which different conceptions and ideas can meet each other with respect, and in which political compromise, but not uniformity, is a norm. The upheavals we are currently experiencing in the United States are not only alarming in their massiveness, but also tend to destroy the social conditions of a liberal democracy in the long term. In Europe and Germany too, we see similar tendencies very massively during the so-called refugee crisis, but also most recently in the disputes over measures to counter the pandemic, which are prompting conspiracy theorists to warn of an approaching corona dictatorship. It shows the alarming phenomenon that a growing number of people, in view of the loss of clarity in an ever more diverse, ever faster world, can be seduced by simplifying patterns of interpretation in which minorities and or the establishment are assigned the role of a scapegoat. By the way, the corona crisis has almost flipped the political situation in Germany upside down. Before corona, the 2 major topics were climate change plus Fridays for Future, and as I said, the 2015 refugee crisis. Especially the latter caused an increasing, unprecedented polarization of the political system. Above all, in urban areas, the Green Party was able to replace the old dominant forces, the Conservative Party, CDU, and the Social Democrats, as the new People's Party and won many elections. Their agenda was, and still is, clearly pro-migration, fighting climate change, and working for a pluralist liberal society. Those who see this as an elitist program for a privileged, affluent urban population which ignores the problem of blue-collar workers and the poor, the new radical right-wing party, AfD, became very attractive. Between these 2 parties with very clear but totally opposite programs, the 2 governing parties, the Social Democrats and the Conservative, appeared vague, almost random in their positions and increasingly indistinguishable. But with the corona crisis, everything changed. It is no new news that in times of crisis people usually tend to support the incumbents. In this case, though, there was a lot government could have done wrong. But it seems Angela Merkel's compromise-oriented style, avoided 2 extreme steps, was the right approach. As far as we can tell by now, Germany found an adequate way through the crisis. Measures were not as extreme as in Italy, Spain, or even China, but also not as lax as in the early UK weeks or Sweden. This gave her and her government tremendous support, as people in Germany are overall really okay with the degree of anti-corona measures. Surprisingly, after measures in Germany were relaxed, quite many citizens were concerned that it might be too early. I think this shows that people were really putting faith in government. We can even interpret a few anti-government protests as an inverted conspiracy theory. The fact that these people were able to express their opinion and organize protests shows that the measures weren't too harsh and annihilating our basic rights. If you look at the political situation right now, we see quite some things are different compared to pre-corona. The Green Party as well as the radical right AfD have lost support. The governing parties have gained impulse, and the new lines of division aren't found between these two. Also, conservatives and social democrats have been competing with each other since the founding of the Federal Republic. It is indeed on the level of the federation where we currently see the biggest controversies. The initial criticism that the federal system is inadequate for handling a national crisis has been proven wrong. In cases where two different approaches in the federal states were ineffective, the state governments usually converged to a common standard within days. Where differences proved adequate, measures were adjusted, for example with eastern states being less strict due to lower case numbers, while Bavaria followed a very strict approach given its close neighborhood with Italy and Austria. And the biggest political conflict occurred between two members of the Conservatives, Prime Minister Söder in Bavaria, leader of those favoring strict measures, and Armin Laschet, head of the most populated federal state, North Rhine-Westphalia, who tends towards a less strict regime of anti-corona regulations. Many see this conflict as a very relevant one. It may decide who will be the next conservative candidate for head of government in Germany. Given that the conservatives are much stronger than the social democrats and most likely remain so, this may effectively decide who will become Merkel's successor. Back from politics to theory. I think here it becomes obvious that the question of social cohesion, as well as of trust in social and democratic institutions, arise with great urgency. Similar to the situation after the Second World War, but at the same time quite different, today it is a matter of redefining the common bond or the common ground of our living together. A social market economy, interpreted in terms of the ethics of order, Ordnungsethik, is of central importance here. Alfred Müller-Amack, who coined the term social market economy, spoke of social irenic in this context, derived from the Greek term eirene, the Greek word for peace. He meant not only the reconciliation of economic efficiency and social interest in the social market economy, but also the reconciliation of different ideas within the society. Quotation Müller-Amack, thus our hope for a possible unity can only be irenics, a reconciliation that takes the fact of division as given, but does not abandon the effort for a common unity to it. For the time after the war, Müller-Amack saw in the current of Capitalism, Protestantism, socialism and liberalism the predominant social political tendencies that had to be reconciled. Not in order to level or flatten these individual views, these different approaches to society, but to work together in mutual respect to shape society. For him, this is the basis for an ethically sensitive social market economy that pacifies society. Quotation Müller-Amack, here too, ironic thinking means being able to think in multiple perspectives, to be sure of the constant, indispensable goal, and at the same time to be familiar with the technical principles according to which social goals can be achieved more realistically. In this sense, social market economy itself can be understood as an ironic formula, again quotation Müller-Amack, which tries to bring the ideals of justice, freedom, and economic growth into a reasonable balance. These thoughts of Müller-Armack are highly topical in view of the social challenges and conflicts of our day. We can only make our society humane if we recognize diversity, respect the legitimate interest of all, and seek ways to achieve this. This also means that the value of social ironics in the ethics of order of the social market economy takes precedence over mere economic principles. There's no question that these principles, from private property and freedom of contract to the primacy of monetary policy, are not only justified, they are undoubtedly important also in ethical terms. However, what Hermann Josef Wallraff once said about Christian social ethics is just valid for the ethics of order of the social market economy. The social market economy is in a way a structure of open sentences. And that means that there are no iron, unchangeable principles of the social market economy which must be enforced against all resistance. Reality is more important than principles, and compromises lead further than supposedly clear answers. As a recent research collaboration of mine with colleagues from Elke de Jong's team at the Radboud University in Nijmegen, incidentally about a somewhat similar topic, has concluded. The undogmatic approach of the social market economy does not shy away from revising its advice for economic policy over time, and also does not take shame deviating from perceived first best solution if societal conditions do not warrant their implementation. This brings me to my third point, and thus, with all warranted caution, back to Eugen's constituting principles, namely the one about steadiness of economic policy, which Eugen also saw as a central element in a market economy. It should again be clear how a rapid introduction of the practice of a debt jubilee would not conform to this principle at all. More so than that, it would seem to take our eyes off the things that really matter. It is one of the great strengths of the social market economy, or call it Rhinish model, if you want, that it enables incremental change of a system of economic policy from within, and does not require exogenous, momentous, and almost revolutionary changes to be brought in from the outside. Instead, political systems and their economic manifestations can be reformed from the inside in a gradual process. Indeed, this has been one of the main stories of the past decades in Germany, where debt levels, which were generally considered as too high and were feared to rise further given the repercussion of the global financial crisis and later the euro crisis, were easily reduced without any drastic measures apart from the decent economic development and some degree of fiscal prudence. By the way, similar stories could be told for the Netherlands and Austria. Now, I do not want to go into the specifics of the German instrument of the debt brake, which basically forbids the government to go into debt, especially in a very special circumstances such as during a pandemic. Many good as well as bad things can be said about the specifics of how the mechanism works, and there are people more qualified to go into these details than me. But I would like to use this experience of the social market economy to illustrate that debt, whether public or private, is not an inevitable fate, but that it can be reduced and made more sustainable with some goodwill and the right policies and institutions in place. Yet again, it seems to me that the initiative here we are discussing focus a bit too much, perhaps we have to discuss it, a bit too much on changing the system per se than to look for easy wins within the system. As I have laid just now, I think those can be found if one is inclined to find them and has some patience to wait until the desired results finally show up. So you see, I'm an optimistic. What I do see as valuable in the various proposals we will discuss at the conference is the effort to bring a longer-term time horizon to financial matters. I think that's a very important thing, and we have to discuss about that. Even to think about such issues reminds me of a research program that I have been aiming to push over the last decade or so, namely the one of contextual economics. While in isolating economics, which is, I would say, still the mainstream of the profession tries to capture what is going on in markets at the expense of abstracting from anything that happens on the fringes of various markets, the contextual approach takes very seriously all the events and institutions that shape economic life on the side. So I'm really convinced that we have to discuss always economic issues together with societal issues. Economic and society belongs together and have to be discussed together. Such a approach sensitizes the eyes of the analyzing economist to the land that lies, as the ordoliberal economist Willem Röpke has called it, beyond supply and demand. The ability to look beyond what is merely economic is certainly one of the great strengths of the Rhinish approach of the social market economy, and it is one that easily lends itself to fostering the true understanding between investor, debtor, and company that your initiative is trying to establish. Also, the idea that the economy, no matter whether we are talking about the real or the financial economy, is not the ultimate end of economic activity, is easily connected to Röpke and the ordoliberal movement. Consequently, Röpke was also a forerunner of what one would call the environmental movement today, showing very respect for the boundaries of our planet and the limits of economic development at the cost of natural environment. Hence he, and with him, the entire ordoliberal research agenda would be easily connectable to the theme of this event. So, when the initiative speaks about today's great challenges and asked how a complete overhaul of the financial system could help to overcome them, I, again, have to provide you with a perhaps disappointing answer. When we look at the past 100 years, we have always had great challenges, and this would actually somewhat of an understatement. Nevertheless, the market economy has proven itself to be an extremely workable and adaptive system that, in general, promotes the economic interests of people reasonably well. I therefore contend that our efforts have to be directed at maintaining, but of course improving the system as good as we can. Many people have opined over the past few months that the effects of the ongoing corona pandemic will spell the end of capitalism itself. While there indeed were severe turbulences on all major international stock markets in March and early April, these turbulences seem to have subsided for now. Similarly, it also seems as if the global bond markets have thus far failed to collapse, and even small and medium enterprises are not lining up for collapse and liquidation. It seems as if the current European financial, economic and social models, social market economies, that is, have once again provided workable solutions to grave and unexpected problems. Targeted government subsidies and stimulus programs such as the famous Kurzarbeit, short-time work with the difference in remuneration being paid for by the government, have avoided the worst outcomes so far. Additionally, there appear to be certain welcome developments underway in finance itself. The increased popularity of ETFs, exchange rate index funds, have given retail investors hitherto unknown possibilities to invest in broadly diversified portfolios at negligible cost with the effort of the click of a button. While this does not necessarily make finance more personal or local, it certainly helps millions of people around the world to meet their financial goals. Additionally, investor behavior has recently shifted to accommodate the greater desire of environmental consciousness among the general public, giving rise to vast amounts of financial products dedicated to the cause of ESG, or environmentally sustainable investing. So, as you can see, the world of finance is not static at all, but instead constantly changing in incremental steps, perhaps to better accommodate the needs of its users. While of course not everything is well in this regard, it remains my firm conviction that the remaining problems can and must be solved within the prevailing system of a market economy and its associated financial system. I hope to have shown you that the tradition of the German social market economy would indeed strengthen a conclusion of that sort, but would also not despair because of the problems that still remain to be resolved. With the help of a strong, but limited, and well-supervised state, many of the problems related to debt and the financial markets can indeed be overcome. It will be not easy. We have to think about prudent solutions for these problems, but I think we have to find these solutions within the market, or with the help of the market. Although the lens of contextual economics helps us better appreciate societal needs and enables an analyzing economist to integrate these qualitative data points into the analysis, this should not make us blind towards the historical achievements of a well-ordered market economy. And to say it perhaps again, so I think we have to look more on the real issues going on than trying to have empirical research only by numbers, but we need some research by words as well. Taking into account of what I said earlier about Müller-Armand's take on the ironic formula of the social market economy, this approach means constantly readjusting how a liberal economy and society can be shaped and how principles can be interpreted in the light of changing conditions. This is especially true in times like this, in times of crisis, but also fundamentally for the necessary corrections of the social security system in view of demographic change or the further development of competition law in view of monopolistic tendencies in the digital economy. And not the least, it is also a workable guiding principle for addressing the shortcomings of the financial sector and proposing reforms for overcoming them, as we are going to discuss on Monday. At the heart of this, it should be the unalterable demand that the economy must serve people and not the other way round. I thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to further discussing this matter with you on Monday.